Hey there, I'm Josh, and today I'm going to be just joshing around, fixing up my deck. This deck was in serious need of some TLC. We built the main part of it about 9 years ago. Then we added on a section about 4 years ago. Now, the way I decided to add on was by just basically butt joining the new deck onto the existing part. You know, like a moron. So I was left with a very obvious and distinct seam between the two parts. Besides that though, we were doing pretty well to keep up with cleaning, prepping, and staining it every other year. Up until the last time, which was 3 years ago. You see, we waited until 1 year after the addition to allow the boards to dry out, did all the appropriate prep work, then stained it all. And it looked great, for like, not even a year. By the way, as you can see, we get some really awesome views of rainbows on our back deck. But anyway, a lot of that stain that we applied just chipped off within a year. I got so irritated that I decided to skip staining it on the appropriate time to, teach the deck a lesson or something. You want some fresh stain, do ya? No! You don't get any this year. Anyway, I also had a couple of boards that were, well, pretty much crap. They split and rotted. And some of the railing, as you can see, was looking pretty nasty. And that seam at the addition was getting progressively worse and spreading apart. So I decided to fix things up. The first thing was to rip up all of the old railing that I wanted to replace. Since I used a framing nailer to assemble most of it, I just grabbed a hammer and a crowbar and tore it up pretty quickly. I did use some screws for the assembly, so I took those out and then flipped this board off as well. I then went to work on cutting out all of the railing cap pieces using some brand new 2x6s. I cut a 45-degree miter on the one end, and then laid it in place to figure out where I needed to make my bevel cut. I made sure to offset the joints for the railing cap from the 2x4 side rail joints, just to make everything extra sturdy. Once I figured out the placement for my bevel cut, I changed all the settings on my miter saw to accommodate that. That's one thing I really like about this saw, is how quick and easy it is to change everything over to get the correct cut. Once I got the board cut down to size, I laid it in place and secured it all using some deck screws. I then repeated the same process in reverse for the other end of the railing cap. I used some clamps to hold everything in place while I drove in the screws, and I made sure that the top cap was flush with the side rail. For the corner, I drove some screws down through the face of the board into the post below. Then I clamped the two edges together and pre-drilled some holes and drove in some screws. This made a really nice and tight, and most importantly, square miter joint. Next, it was time to start on the deck boards. The method I used to remove all the old deck boards that I didn't want was to first drill a pilot hole so that I could slip the jigsaw blade down inside and cut the board apart. If I had to do it over again, I would just simply use my oscillating tool to cut the boards. But as of the time of filming this, I didn't have one of those yet. Regardless, this way of doing it actually worked pretty well. You can see pretty clearly how crappy some of these boards were. And I really don't understand how a piece of pressure-treated lumber that is not even 10 years old can be this rotted. But wow, what a piece of crap. I then started pulling up all the other boards that were going to be replaced. There is a method to my madness, which you'll see here in a moment. But first, look at these treasures that I found beneath the deck boards. Some old Batman phonics books.
Collect the whole set.
I'll just buzz through the rest of these end boards real quick. Next, with some help from my trusty sidekick, I marked off about halfway into the addition on the deck boards that I'll be removing. I then repeated the same process of drilling a pilot hole and then using my jigsaw to cut the boards off. Sorry about all the shaky cam. My daughter actually did the filming, and she did a really good job of holding the camera steady, but when you speed up that footage, it makes it look just a little bit shaky. Once the boards were all cut, we used a hammer and crowbar once again to pull everything up. You can kind of get a better look at what I'm doing here. Instead of having an obvious seam between the old part of the deck and the addition, I'm going to interlace the boards together to offset the joints. Now, to take care of that seam, first I used some clamps to make the floor joists level with each other. When I first built the addition, the joists were level, but the wood shrank and settled a bit, causing the level to be uneven between the two decks. Once those were good, I used a spade bit and drilled a hole through the two joists. I then tapped a big honkin' stainless steel bolt through the hole. I put a nut, a lock washer, and a flat washer on the other side and then cranked it down tight. This made the gap much smaller. Then I just repeated that same process about 12 more times. I'll just speed through the rest of these. You get the idea. Once the joists were all nice and tight, I went to work on cutting down all the deck boards. Once again, I have to say, I really like this saw, but holy crap does it make a lot of dust. And yeah, I realize I don't have any sort of dust collection attached to it right now, but even when I do, it still just throws out a ton of dust. I'll have to do something about that at some point. But for now, let's get these deck boards laid down. For the ends of the boards, I needed something to attach them to, so I screwed in some cleats to the side of the joist. To be honest, the best way to handle this, and the way I probably should have done it, was to run an extra joist alongside this other one. However, I gave a few of the cleats a test try by laying a board on top of it before screwing it down and standing on one foot with my full weight just to see if it would budge, and it was rock solid. But still, one potential problem I could see arising would be shrinkage, causing an uneven surface between the boards. But if that comes up, I can always adjust it. I just need to be aware of the possibility of it happening. Once the cleats were all mounted, I started installing the boards. I got them all laid down in their spaces, and then pre-drilled the ends, and then started screwing them into place. I made each board have an extra snug fit, to compensate for any future shrinkage. I was also careful to center the ends of the new boards against the old boards, just because I didn't want to end up with a big uneven gap on the sides. I once again employed the use of my trusty sidekick to finish everything off. By the way, he's gotten a lot bigger since the last time he was out here helping me on this deck. See what I mean? Anyway, we got the rest of the screws in so everything was nice and solid, and now it was ready for stain. Well, almost. You see, everything you've seen so far, including what you're seeing now, was actually filmed back in the fall of last year. I did this in order to let the boards sit out in the weather for a sufficient time to dry out, because I sure as heck didn't want to apply new stain too prematurely, because if it chips off again, I'm probably going to flip out. But regardless, that was then. Now let's fast forward to now. Which is technically still not now, it's just not then. Because now would be when I'm talking right now, and the deck is finished, but I'm not showing that. But you know what? Let's not get tripped up in the semantics of it all. You get the idea. These are the products I'll be using to finish the deck. The blue one is a chemical peeler to get rid of all the old stain. The green one is a cleaner, and you have the stain itself, a tank sprayer, a pressure washer, and a scrub brush. The first step for the preparation is to apply this chemical stripper. You basically just slather this stuff on and then let it sit for a while. And once you let it work its magic, you use a scrub brush to work it all out. Once that step's done, you use a pressure washer to spray it all away. After that, you mix up some of this green labeled stuff in a tank sprayer and apply it. This serves to deactivate any of the chemical stripper that might be left over, while also prepping the wood for the stain. You once again use the pressure washer to spray away all of the cleaner. After it's all dry, you might want to lightly sand the surface as well. I know we did, I just didn't film it. Then, it's finally time for stain. Now the stuff we used is made by Behr. It's called Advanced Deck Over, and it's sold at Home Depot. It's supposed to be extra protective, and to breathe a lot of new life into older decks. We'll see about all that. I have my reservations just based on past experiences, but I'm hopeful. Now, let's take a look at the deck all finished up. I do have to admit, I'm really happy with how it turned out. Though the color of stain that we picked is a little more on the red side than I would have liked. I still like it. But I really like how the deck just looks like one continuous deck instead of, some Frankenstein's monster like it did before. And one other thing I have to say is a big thank you to my wife for taking care of the vast majority of all the preparation and staining duties. She knows how much I absolutely hate to stain decks, and she really stepped up to take it on. Now the only thing I'm hoping is that it lasts for a long time. Well, I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out on the deck. It feels a lot more solid, and I think it looks great. And the new stain definitely brought some life back into it. And a big thanks once again to my wife for taking on the staining duties. She knows how much I hate staining the deck, so for her to take care of that was pretty cool. Now hopefully the stain holds up pretty well for a few years, because we meticulously followed all the instructions for prep. And the cost wasn't exactly cheap, so it better last. Though all in all, I'm pretty happy with the results and everything. Hopefully you found this video helpful in some way and you enjoyed watching it. And if you did, please consider leaving a like below and sharing it with somebody. And check out some of my other stuff that's going to pop up in a second here. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.